Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew, and Jeffrey Sherman is out today. He is recovering from some sinus thing. So today we have a guest instead. We have Ryan Cowan on, and Ryan, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey everybody. Yeah, Isaac, thanks for having me. Jeffrey, I hope you feel better soon. But yeah, my name is Ryan Cowan. Isaac and I used to work together back in Chicago and then remotely a couple of years ago. But I've been in the software industry for about 14, 15 years now, and specifically a manager for the past 6 years or so across a handful of industries, working with different types of tech and different types of engineering teams.
Awesome. So, listeners, the reason I've invited Ryan on today is Ryan managed me at a previous company, and we have talked a couple of times about rewrites, obviously, on this podcast, from the perspective, a lot of times, of individuals on the teams, but not very many times from the perspectives of managers. And so I got curious about the concept of maybe hearing from a manager's perspective when you hear this push from people on your team, of people who are just complaining left and right about, the code being crap. We have to rewrite the whole thing. It's irredeemable. You
Hmm.
know, maybe some ideas on, like, if you've heard it before, some stories you've heard or things you do to placate those people, or give in if there's some kind of weird politics in the company that is pushing and strong arming you to say yes to those people as well. So, do you have any interesting stories from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, first off, listening to the signal of the team, you know, do I need to placate people? Is it a matter of just one person, complaining about this project they're working on and they just don't like it, or they don't like the language, or they
Mm-hmm.
don't like the way that it's structured? Maybe that's just a personal issue, and some placation, can happen there. Maybe it's a push from the whole team to do a bigger rewrite, or a code cleanup type session where they're not focused on product work. That tends to happen a lot, where that cruft develops over time. You start to build up maybe sets of errors that you can fix eventually, or you
Mm-hmm.
think that you can if you rewrite something completely or switch to a different language or whatever it may be. Um, so there could be the pressures from the team. There could also be the pressures from senior leadership in engineering to say, hey, this thing doesn't scale the way we want it to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's rewrite it in, a faster language or a multi-threaded language or something, and really take advantage of, some core feature set that we're actually interested in or that we think we need. Um, but yeah, I mean, to dive into like specific examples or things
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen, recently there was a team of data engineers that I was working with, where they basically inherited this new product that was like a data pipeline, basically. So they inherited this thing, and it was written in a language that neither of them knew. So immediately they wanted to rewrite this whole thing in a language they did know, since they would be the ones now maintaining it. So you could tell immediately there was a big disconnect in the planning and handoff
Mm-hmm.
process, because these two engineers who were, written down, scheduled to inherit this thing, didn't know the language it was actually written in. So they had to
Right.
study up on that language, make sense of what was actually happening in the flow of this service, and then start to rewrite it. So they ended up rewriting it in Python, but it was a huge time investment to initially create this thing, hand it
Right.
off, go through a couple hour sessions to make sure everyone knew what was actually happening, or to the best of their ability, and then to essentially just rewrite it for the next week or two anyway. So in that case, it was really a push from the engineering team to get that rewrite done, but it was there's still buy-in from senior leadership, because they could recognize that the engineers they have didn't know the language the thing was written in. So they knew they had to correct the issue that had kind of bubbled up through that planning process. Again, a very kind of strange experience. I should caveat that whole thing by saying uh, the company tends to move very fast.
Mm-hmm.
The one that was working on that project, there's lots of throwaway work or lots of pivots in project planning. So this type of situation they found themselves in was not unusual. It was pretty common to see that every couple of weeks where some big issue like that would pop up. Um, but yeah, there are certainly times where you've got to just placate an individual, whether they're just frustrated with the work they're doing, the thing they've inherited. Um, Maybe they don't enjoy the language they're programming in, and they just need
Yeah.
to vent. And in that case, it's not necessarily worth doing anything with that feedback beyond listening and being empathetic as much as you can, or maybe trying to find other opportunities for that person.
In the case of the company pushing the Python rewrite,
Hmm.
what was the concept again about like why did they pick Python? They just somebody higher level knew that that was the best language for it, even though nobody on the team was as familiar with the language.
Well, Python was the language that the two engineers who inherited that project knew and wanted to
Mm.
rewrite the thing in. It was
Oh,
actually written
okay.
in a different language before that.
I see. I
Um,
see. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Which is the person who worked on it before or initially knew that other language but didn't know Python. So it was a lot of back and forth. There was handoff from a data team to more of like a web, more centric type team. But again, lots of handoff and trading of ownership and responsibility there, which
So
caused all of that kind of confusion.
was it just rewritten so people could support it better? Like what problem
Yeah,
was it
yeah.
solving for? Okay.
Yeah, so it was rewritten so that these two data engineers could maintain and move forward with adding features to this thing. Because
Interesting. Yeah.
this pipeline was really kind of like the bedrock, the cornerstone of the rest of the work that had been planned out for at least a quarter.
Yeah, I'm used to hearing things like rewriting for scalability issues
Hmm.
or, things are hard to maintain because like imagine if the other language is so old that it's hard to hire for these days, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
it's another I don't think I've heard it too many times that you're rewriting for the sake of employees being happy or being able to extend a particular product, like just for the sake of the employees and their language and the
yeah,
supportability there. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it seems very like altruistic of the company, right, or the senior leadership. But really, it was more like we need these two engineers focused on this thing, for the next 3 months at least. So they need to be able to move forward, and we don't want them to have to learn this new language and fumble around and make mistakes and go through all that. We need something a bit more bulletproof after the fact.
So it was just the two engineers rewriting it.
Hmm.
So this must have been a smaller project that was small enough for them to actually do this. Because a lot of times on the show we talk about like how you should never rewrite because
Right.
it's almost like the name of the podcast. But generally speaking, you shouldn't. But if you have a project that's small that two people can do that, given
Hmm.
backing from uh, the organization, which oftentimes you won't have because
Right.
people
Right.
but they don't, they get mad because you're taking too long to swap over to the new system and you're stopping making features on the old system, that kind of thing. But if you're
Hmm.
small enough, if I guess there's like a caveat there. We could probably Jeffrey and I could probably talk more about too later, just about the
Yeah.
size of the rewrite. Because a lot of times we're talking about like a monolithic application that's like 10 years old.
Hmm.
That's a big
Hmm.
one. But if you've got a small little thing that you can port over, maybe there's another case there to be made.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the podcast can be renamed "Never Rewrite dot dot dot,"
Asterisk.
unless. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the fun part about it is like a lot of times we'll invite folks on just to give a counterpoint because
Mm,
we've heard
mm,
of there's been a few successful rewrites and guests who have talked about successful rewrites. It's the Khan Academy
mm, mm.
episode that we had recently. They were able to achieve a rewrite, but our guest basically said that it would be impossible to do again. It was just like
Mm.
he was completely baffled that it happened the first time. You had to have so much go right, so much backing, so much political backing from the company
Mm. Mhm.
to get it done right. But it does happen, but it's still just it's difficult. So anyway, let's swap back to these cases of placating the individual. So you say sometimes you want to placate the individual. In what case would you want to placate the individual?
Sure, sure. I think I'll try not to be too specific with examples, but uh, if it's a project that maybe 4 or 5 engineers on a team are working on, and nobody really seems to voice or have an issue, after some deep conversations or looking through pull requests or whatever. But there's one individual who does, take issue with maybe the way things are written, or the coding style, or whatever kind of structure has been set up there. Maybe it's more of a them problem versus an us problem. And in that case, it's worth talking with the person who's bothered or affected
Hmm.
to figure out why. And then maybe you could go into placating mode and
Yeah.
kind of explain away, like, yeah, this is how we need to do things now. If you really want to push for a rewrite, like, let's get a one pager going and try to build up
Okay.
support. So you can certainly give options based on the company and how they choose to do things, what their process is. Typically, it could be a one pager kind of summarizing what the current problem is, what the proposed solution is, and what gets better because of that solution. At least those three pieces, if not more, to say, like, we're going to save money, we're going to reduce overhead, we won't need as many engineers to support this thing, or it'll be
Hmm.
more automated, less
Yeah.
manual for engineers or ops or customer service or whoever. So there could be some really great ideas that this person has, or to get a little pessimistic, it could be just venting, or just frustration, or something else that's bothering them, and it's kind of being taken out on the code base or the work that they're doing.
Sure.
Maybe they got switched teams 2 weeks ago, and now they're working on this new thing, then they just don't like it, or
Right.
they're still getting used to the team or to the code base, and it's a little trickier. So really kind of figuring out what the root cause is, or what the concern is around what this person may feel, and trying to work with that in some way. But listening tends to help, at least to start.
Yeah. We had a recent episode about emotionally invested, or employees that are emotionally invested in the rewrite.
Hmm,
And then the one pager concept kind of touches on what I was bringing up. And that at the
sure.
previous company, it was really nice to hear from somebody. Isaac, we hear you.
Hmm,
We're gonna, list out reasons why we're not going to do that in favor of other things,
hmm,
rather than me just doing the venting, right? But it feels like no one's listening. Where I'm like, there's so many problems. I'm trying to do this, but like no one's answering me. I know I'm not feeling heard, basically.
hmm,
So it's really nice when you get the one pager going, or some kind of pitch, and you say, well, these are the things I want to do and the reasons I want to do them. And if
right.
the company can come back and say, well, we're going to say no, but here's why. One, here's how much that would cost, because your estimates here show that this would take 6 months, and that's X amount of dollars if your team's working on that, and we can quantify it. And we don't think it's worth the money, you
Sure.
know. Or two, there's other things that are broken-er, and those broken-er things
Uh-huh.
probably should get prioritized. And maybe you didn't know about them because you're working on a team, and we're bigger picture, and we can see how all the teams are working together. So it's really easy as an individual to get lost in that. So I think guiding them towards that one pager, or just letting them vent, is definitely has helped me in the
Uh,
past.
Yeah, totally. I think that's where an engineering manager can really come in and provide an individual with ideas or possible paths forward, or an ear to at least hear them out.
Hmm.
Um, but then if they choose to do a one pager or a lunch and learn type thing, or some sort of artifact to express what their consternation is, like, you can then take that and do something with it as a manager, and push it up the chain, get it into
Hmm.
a planning meeting, get it, uh, you know, uh, scoped out, or even presented, as part of a roadmap, and say, can this fit on the roadmap? Can it
Hmm.
fit in the next, 2 months, the next 2 years? Is there a spot for it? Or, can it go into this, like, backlog of projects that we can then, pick and choose from to bring into the roadmap, or bring in when we're in maybe a slow period, if there's such a thing in the industry. So it's I think it's the engineering manager or whoever in the leadership's responsibility to do something with it, and then to bring it back to that individual or to the team and say, here's what I did, here's what I presented, here are the reasons that we can't do this now or can't do it ever,
Yeah.
or here are the things that we need to refine or to make more clear. Maybe the company's a little more focused on money and their bottom line, so then maybe we center the pitch around here's how we save money by doing this
Right.
this rewrite. Really focus on the levers that people will respond to try to get this thing done, or at least push to get it in front of the right people who can then decide if it should be. Engineering managers could help at least in that regard, if not, identifying those issues on their own and bringing them to the team and saying, "Hey, is this an actual issue, or am I just seeing things here that signals that I'm misinterpreting?"
Right. If somebody comes back to you, or the organization says no,
Mhm.
how many times have you had to go back to individuals and say, this is what they said, we're not going to do that? Like, is that generally well received if you can provide some clarity behind it, or do you have people who are just like, and just, frustrated anyway?
Yeah. I think 9 times out of 10, it's well received to know that something was done, that they were heard, like you mentioned, um, that you attempted to do something and to push it forward and to provide support and backing for this idea, or this rewrite that this person or this team was interested in doing. Um, there are often times that you can compromise and at least get some piece of your pitch brought in. Whether it's in
Yeah.
between, like the product cycles, depending on how the team works, you could get at least a little downtime and maybe get a couple of things knocked out that could start to build up towards more of a rewrite type situation or the full pitch that you had envisioned. Um, but yeah, the occasional one time out of 10 where somebody is frustrated still, it's tricky to work with that because as a manager you've done a lot to support them, and it's
Yeah.
not gone through for whatever reason, and you've got to be kind of that bearer of bad news to say this just isn't going to happen. Like
Right.
the reality of the company, the team, the project, the roadmap, whatever, just doesn't allow us to do this now. We can keep talking about it and keep thinking about it, but as it stands, we just can't do it. And then maybe we can go into compromise mode or into biting off smaller chunks or doing like a hackathon type thing or a POC or some other means for this person to try to express their idea and to prove themselves out. But really it becomes the manager setting the individual or the team up to actually do the work and to put in the time and the effort to get that thing done. So you're
Yeah.
not doing it for them. You're just providing some tools or some ideas on how they can do it and try to prove it even further. If their initial pitch was denied.
Okay. Well, then my next question for you, I guess, is given our kind of definition of rewrites, which here at Never Rewrite is generally a big bang rewrite
Mm-hmm.
of a fairly large project that could take months to do
Mm-hmm.
correctly. How often have you seen a project like that pitched versus how often have you seen something like that succeed in your 15 odd years of software development?
Yeah. So oddly enough, one of the first engineering jobs I had out of college was basically a rewrite of an entire system.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it it was called a rewrite because there was an engineer who worked there before me who had written some piece of this system. It was meant to be like an administrative portal for this team to support tutors who would go to schools and do after school tutoring for like elementary and middle school kids. So tons of just record keeping essentially, super basic models and database tables, and then some PHP, for logic and front end stuff. So very minimal design, no JS framework on top of it. Just very bare bones.
Okay.
And this engineer had written some of it. It was somewhat functional, and then they had left. So I joined the team and essentially did a rewrite of what I had seen and read through that had already existed. But really, it was almost more of like a greenfield type thing, or at least that's how I approached it. Where I
Okay.
then went to all the people who would actually use it, figured out what they actually needed, what functions I needed to have in this thing, and then started to build it out. So, first job out of school was essentially doing a rewrite-esque type thing. Um, but since then, I haven't seen a ton of pitches, maybe one at each company I've been at, where I've either seen or heard or read through somebody trying to pitch a rewrite of something big. A lot of the time, it'll come from an engineer or an engineering team that's really close to that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it'll come from leadership coming in, having dealt with the thing for many years and wanting to rewrite it, and that becomes like their pet project.
Right.
Other times I've seen new leadership come in and want to change things up to match their style a bit more, or to leave their mark and to kind of bulldoze the past and start anew. Um, but yeah, it happens maybe once every year or two. Would be I think as often as I've seen it. So not too often.
Once every you've seen it succeed, or you've heard someone pitch it.
I've heard somebody pitch it.
Yeah, okay.
I,
I was
I,
going to
I
say,
don't know if
wow, that's incredible.
I.
That's incredible. What do you think? Why do you think your first rewrite out of college succeeded?
I think it succeeded because the thing that existed before the thing I built was used didn't really satisfy the users, and it essentially was a failure or a flop. It didn't get the job done that needed to be done. So there was an intense desire from these what we called coordinators. So they would match the tutors with the students in the school and do all sorts of sales and
Mm-hmm.
record keeping and stuff. And they were unhappy with the solution that existed. So it became a matter of me talking to them and figuring out what they actually wanted to see in there and how I could make it easier for them to enter all this information in.
Got
So
it.
I think there was probably business pressure. Up to I reported to the CEO. It was a very small company. I think he was probably feeling a lot of pressure because these coordinators were the ones who brought in revenue. Essentially, they made contracts with the schools, and then the schools paid us, per session or per quarter or whatever it was. So I imagine that it succeeded because there was that top down support to actually
Yeah.
build something that was usable.
And
Um,
you bring another interesting caveat too, is
mm,
that the first iteration didn't work. So maybe that's another like acceptance criteria of what we consider a rewrite here, because we're writing things that currently work in one system to make them more scalable. But if your
mm.
first thing you built never solved the problem to begin with, are you really rewriting it, or are you building something new? Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my hesitation because
Mm-hmm.
maybe we could call it a rewrite, but really it was more of another start to this project, to this thing.
Yeah, I've done something recently where somebody hired some offshore contractors for a job and
Mm,
delivered something, and it did not solve the problem at all, and
mm,
they built it in the wrong technology, wrong everything, and it was just like this
mhm,
was just a really bad approach to it, and so
mm,
they hired me to rebuild it, and I
mhm.
didn't really rebuild it because I didn't build what they were building. I built my own thing that solved the problem the correct way.
Sure.
So if someone took the correct working solution of mine, then remade it in a different language, I consider that a rewrite. But it is
Okay.
interesting
Okay.
because like our very first episode when we were talking about rewriting, we had
Hmm.
some comments from folks and they were like, this whole episode they said don't rewrite, but they basically rewrite it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we were explaining the difference between rewriting and refactoring, or like
Mm,
iterative delivery, or
hmm.
Jeffrey coined this term thesis shipping for like the ship of Theseus idea, like replacing boards of the ship piece by piece,
Yeah.
which we're
Yeah.
not considering rewriting, but it
Mm.
becomes lost in all these different jargon that we've created for ourselves. So we'll have to come up with one for that one too, where it's like it has to be this, and this to be considered a rewrite that we're talking
Right.
about is never do that thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, to piggyback off that first story, when I left that company after a couple of years, I trained my replacement, who ended up doing a rewrite
Hmm.
of the thing I had built. So they switched from this PHP monstrosity I had built
Now that's a
to
rewrite.
yeah
That's a
to
real
Ruby on
rewrite.
Rails.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, interesting. A PHP to Rails, because usually the PHP
Hmm.
framework, I think Laravel and similar ones are built in very Ruby-esque styles, or very heavily inspired. Their frameworks are from Ruby on Rails. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Feels like that's just a preference. He probably just really liked Ruby, Ruby on Rails, rather.
Yeah. It was definitely a preference thing of this new person coming in and going, I know Ruby. I'm gonna rewrite this thing in Ruby
That's what we
or
normally hear
Rails. Yeah.
about. People
Yeah.
come in, this is dumb. I hate PHP. We're going to rebuild this because I just
Hmm.
don't like this language,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
not the greatest reason. But, sometimes it's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure.
Well, maybe that ties back into the example I had before of rewriting into Python.
Hmm.
Uh, it's kind of the same concept of we don't like this other language. We do like Python. We know Python. Let's rewrite this thing.
Yeah, it's a I think like I've heard people wanting to build things in like really bespoke languages, and then
Mm-hmm.
people going, okay, well we don't really want to do that for those languages because it's really hard to hire for those. We'd rather build it in something that's easy to hire for, like build it in JavaScript, because a lot of people there's like a huge pool of people for JavaScript. That's like a kind of like one of the more rational I think approaches to pushing for a rewrite is like going, these people built it in C sharp, and we can't find a lot of really talented C sharp developers because everyone's studying and learning, JavaScript and Python, which are
Mm-hmm.
huge pools to hire from. Maybe we should rebuild it in those for the sake of making it easy to hire for. That's a pretty good reason, I think.
Okay. Let me turn the tables on you a bit and ask, as an engineer,
Hmm.
are there things you look for in a manager that,
Ah,
uh, whether it's support on maybe a rewrite idea or a refactor idea, there are things that you lean on your leadership team to help with, or that you would expect somebody in a leadership position to do or to help you in some way.
um, I think what I would look for in, well, generally speaking, I think that now that I'm more mature in the career than I was, like I took personal offense to not getting my, the thing that was broken fixed.
Mm-hmm.
If I couldn't get someone rallied behind that, or they just pushed back or didn't answer, I would take offense to it. So the thing you brought out earlier about like going to like working with me to create
Mm-hmm.
that one pager, working, like if I can see you putting in the work to take it to someone else to come back
Sure.
and say they said no, we tried, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're going to make headway here. That makes me feel like you're on my side. That makes me feel like
Sure.
you're helping me push my ideas. You hear me. You hear my concerns. You know. So I think that in a good manager, that's definitely a huge piece of it. Is like you want to feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
The most frustrating part is when you think something is done poorly and you want to redo it for whatever reasons, and it feels like no one is listening to you. So I'll basically kind of half answering it there, because the other part of me is like, now I don't think I should rewrite very frequently, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So I would want a manager to encourage me to do that, because I think that most of the times it would fail, and because I really do think the more I understand from the business perspective how much of a resource constraint it is, how much of a money constraint it is to do that. Um, and generally speaking, when you hear people's reasons, and they are reasons like, yeah, I don't like this language, or this is dumb, or if the reasons aren't there, then it doesn't even really make sense. But let's say
Mm.
the reasons are all there. Let's say
Sure.
like it's a weird language, we can't hire for it, it's written poorly. There's all these kind of things that really push us for that. Then yeah, the same thing there. If I can go to somebody who vouches for me
Mm.
and like helps not just me, but maybe like pitches the idea to the team to get other people's ideas on how we can solve this problem, solve it for the right reasons, I love the idea earlier where you were talking about where if the company says we don't have the money for that, then you
Mhm.
go, well, here's how to save you money. Kind of
Right.
try to find a way to still sell it to solve
Hmm.
both the problem of the frustrated developer and the problem of the company who thinks that this is not going to help them monetarily.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the way you've outlined it to uh, cheesily make you the perfect fit for this, the way you've outlined it is what I would be expecting, right?
Sure.
That's a good
Sure.
way to phrase it, because the worst thing you can do is just make the engineer feel like either they're not heard or they're dumb for suggesting it,
Mm.
or you know I guess things like that. That would be my answer. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, what about? I'm trying to think of a couple years ago when I was working with very senior and like staff level engineers who could rewrite large portions of the systems that they knew. They had been they had either built the system themselves or had been working in that area or that system for many years and could take on a larger initiative and just really run with it
Mm-hmm.
and make it part of um, do like maybe a refactor as part of a product feature or product upgrade and just kind of like roll it in. Is that something that uh, maybe I answered my own question here. Is that more of a refactor or more of a rewrite where you say, hey, I've got this product feature to do, but I'm also going to rewrite the backend to support this in a better way or in a different way or in a way that's more streamlined for me or for somebody else who happens to consume the service. Um,
Yeah, in my
do
head, that's more of a refactor. You're basically just expanding a feature, and you can't support that feature until you've added some kind of backend capabilities or something. And the rewrites, as we define it, is just more like the entire system itself has to be changed to a new language, essentially,
Okay,
or
so
reconstructed
maybe
entirely. Yeah.
yeah, maybe that's the kind of bounds of the full rewrite that I'm thinking of, where
Mm-hmm.
you're affecting the whole system, not just like a large portion of it.
Yeah, we make a big distinction between rewrite and refactor, but the words, generally speaking, are synonyms, so it's very confusing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to work really hard. You got to be a committed listener to understand our
uh,
terminology.
uh,
Well, all right. So, is there anything else we can touch on here? And actually, one thing too before we leave, I just want to make sure that you have the opportunity. If there's anyone you want to shout out, any kind of open source communities, or anything you want to let people know for like how to get in touch with you or something if they have questions for you. Do you have anything you want to shout out towards the end of our episode here?
sure. Yeah, yeah. Feel free, to reach out on LinkedIn. That's probably a decent way to reach me, at least from more of a professional context. Um, but yeah, it was a blast to chat with you, Isaac, about rewrites and refactors and more of the management perspective, which again is a really interesting place to be because it's not necessarily the one doing the rewrite or even
Yeah.
thinking in those terms, but being able to understand and to empathize with your team or teams and then support them in whatever way you can and push things as far and as hard as you can to make the team happy, but also find a way for the business to be happy at the end of the day too. It's a fine line to walk and, and tricky, but again, thanks for giving me a chance to try to explain some of that and give some examples here.
Sure. It's an honor having you on. I've really enjoyed having you as my manager in the past, and I feel like you do a really good job of vouching for the little guy towards and protecting them from the man. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
always appreciated your wisdom, and especially whenever I'm taking things and like I'm being a bit too aggressive on my end. You do a good job. Like, okay, I hear your concerns, but duly noted. You've said it a few times now. I'm working on it.
sure,
So,
sure,
I
yeah,
really appreciate you on the show to give a little bit of that insight from that perspective.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It's always good to work with you as well. Maybe we'll do it again in the future.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm Isaac Askew, and Jeffrey Sherman will be back soon. And this is Never Rewrite.
Thanks. See ya.
See ya.